My name is Farhan. In this video, you will solve question number 7 from 2018 past exam. This question requires you to prepare a current asset account and an expense account, and also discuss the accounting principle that requires the closing of expense accounts at the end of the financial period. If you want to ace your exams and need tutoring sessions, make sure to check the link in the description to book a call and discuss your requirements. With that being said, let's get started. Caddy's Cakes sells made-to-order cakes. The business reports monthly. On 15 September 2018, the business paid $2,400 plus GST for a 3-month social media campaign that commenced on 1 September 2018. The balance of the prepaid advertising at 30 September 2018 is $1,900. So the balance that we're given at 30 September 2018 is what we refer to as the closing balance. And we also understand the business reports on a monthly basis. So we are interested in transactions that happen from 1st of September 2018 until 30 September 2018. The question requires us to prepare the prepaid advertising and advertising expense accounts at 30 September 2018 and also discuss the accounting principle that requires the closing of expense accounts at the end of the financial period. So here you can see I've just drawn a timeline, and within that timeline, I'm highlighting 3 different time frames. 1st of September 2018, when the advertising campaign started. 15 September 2018, when the business paid $2,400 plus GST for a 3-month advertising campaign. And on 30 September 2018, when we had some closing balance for prepaid advertising of $1,900. Now, the outline has already been given to us for the ledger accounts, which I have already completed. So I'm going to explain you each and every step that we have done. First of all, we are given the ledger account for prepaid advertising. Prepaid advertising is a current asset for the business. Now, why is this a current asset for the business? This is because the advertising has been paid for in advance and the business is still yet to consume the economic benefits that will be given to the business in the near future. Now, if you check the question again, you can see that the advertising campaign started on 1st of September 2018, which the business paid $2,400 for a 3-month term on 15 September 2018. What this means is that on 30 September 2018, when we had a closing balance of $1,900, this still hasn't been expensed or consumed by the business. This $1,900 at 30 September 2018 for prepaid advertising refers to the economic benefit in terms of advertising that the business is still yet to use or consume for generating more revenue. So that is why prepaid advertising is a current asset account. And always remember, all assets by default are debit, which means when they increase, they are debited, and when they decrease, they are credited. Again, within the reconstruction of a ledger account, all assets, given that they're always debit by default, should therefore have an opening balance on the debit side, which is what we have already been provided. On 1st of September 2018, we have been given the opening balance of $3,800. What we are doing on the credit side of the ledger account on 30 September, we are showing the closing balance of $1,900. All right. So within the ledger account, we understand that everything on the right-hand side is the debit side and everything on the left-hand side is the credit side. Okay. So everything on the debit side generally reflects an increase in the current assets of the business, and everything on the credit side reflects a reduction in the current assets of the business. So on 15 September, the question says that the business paid for advertising, which refers to a 3-month campaign. So why I'm including this on the debit side? 15 September, we used our funds in the bank account to pay for more prepaid advertising, and that is $2,400 excluding GST. We are not including GST here. GST is to be included separately within the GST clearing account. Prepaid advertising and GST are 2 different classes. Prepaid advertising is a current asset, and GST clearing is what we refer to as a current liability account, because the business will be doing the net calculations for the GST in terms of the payment it has made for GST and in terms of the GST that it has received, and then pay the balance to the ATO at the end of the financial period. So that is a different thing in itself. So that is why within the prepaid advertising, you only include what actually relates to the prepaid advertising, and that is excluding GST of $2,400. So why are we showing this on the debit side though? The reason being because when we are paying for this prepaid advertising, we understand that this is for 3 months, which means our assets within the business in terms of advertising, which is prepaid advertising, are going up. So when assets go up, we have to debit it similar to the opening balance for assets being debited within the ledger account. So that is why on 15 September, on the debit side, we are showing back of $2,400. So this balance here for the advertising of 4,300 is something we had to calculate ourselves by doing the balancing on the debit side first. So what we have done is calculated everything on the heavier side, which it was the debit side. We added the opening balance of 3,800 with 2,400, and then we got 6,200, which must be the balance on the other side as well. So to ensure that the fundamental rules of accounting are applied. So from that 6,200, we subtract the closing balance of 1,900 that we were provided, and we ended up with 4,300 as the missing figure in this case. And that is what we refer to as the advertising expense for the period. So this is the amount that has actually been expensed from 1st of September 2018 until 30th of September 2018. And after 30 September 2018, we still had some current assets in terms of prepaid advertising to consume, and that was $1,900. Right? So once you fulfill all the requirements of the ledger account, don't also forget to show the opening balance in the next period, because a lot of students fail to show the opening balance and they end up losing some marks in the exam. So you see how the closing balance at 30 September shows $1,900. That has to become the opening balance on 1st of October of $1,900. Okay, so now we're moving to the advertising expense account. Always remember that revenue and expense accounts are temporary accounts of the business. This is because if you remember the accrual basis concept, that concept requires you to calculate profit accurately by ensuring that you are only using revenues that have been earned and subtract the expenses that have been incurred. So every new period, the goal is to start with the zero balance for revenue and expense accounts. So that is a requirement under the accrual basis assumption. Now, when we are preparing this advertising account, we already understand it's a temporary account and we have to close this for this period entirely. So what we're doing is that, first of all, we understand from the prepaid advertising account that we had an expense of 4,300. So expenses, always remember, by default are debit. Revenues, always remember, by default are credited. So within the expense account itself, on the debit side, I'm showing 4,300, which is the amount that we have expensed at 30 September 2018, which belongs to the entire advertising expense for the month. And why we are writing prepaid advertising here, though? This is because other than the connection that we have between these two accounts, which follows the dual aspect concept of the accounting principles, the reason being, when we write prepaid advertising at 4,300 here, it basically refers to the consumption of the prepaid advertising balance that we originally had on 1st of September. This refers to the usage of the prepaid advertising from 1st of September. So that is why we are including this on the debit side of 4,300. Then, because this is a temporary account, as we've discussed earlier, we need to close any expense and revenue accounts at the end of the period before we start the next period. So that is why on 30 September, we are closing it to the profit and loss summary or income summary account, and that is 4,300. So when we are doing this, that basically refers to the fact that next period, the balance for advertising expense should be zero. So that way we can accurately determine profit on a monthly basis, which is what the business wants. As you can see, it's given in the first line. Now, so once the advertising expense account is taken care of, what does question B say? With reference to one accounting principle, explain why it is necessary to close one of these accounts. Now, you could use the accrual basis concept in exam and you should get full marks as well. But We also can discuss another concept, which is the period assumption. So what is the period assumption? The period assumption looks into expense accounts and revenue accounts. Now, if you think of expense accounts, as we have already discussed, they're temporary accounts. So this means this expense account needs to be closed before we start the next period. And we close this to profit and loss summary, which helps us accurately determine the correct accounting profit for the period. So it is a similar concept as accrual basis. So even though you used accrual basis in the exam, you would still get full marks as long as you're able to justify your explanation properly. That's all for today's lesson. Make sure to like this video and subscribe this channel, and I'll see you in the next lesson.